Welcome to Let's Talk Antigonish, the podcast where we sit down with neighbors, experts, and friends to explore the stories, the questions, and the big little issues that shape life in our town, one conversation at a time. Did you know that Antigonish is famous for its ghost stories? Well, this week we're going to talk all about the most famous ghosts of Antigonish, some of which are world famous. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Antigonish. This is Justin. My co-host Anuj is still out of the country, so it's just me here, and therefore I get to choose the topics all by myself. And so the one I wanted this time around was ghosts in Antigonish. And you might be wondering why. Well, I was on a tour, a local ghost tour called the Haunted Antigonish Ghost Tour here in Antigonish a few weeks ago. And it was absolutely fascinating, and I thought more people need to know about the ghost stories here in Antigonish. Now, you don't have to be a ghost person, because I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in cool stories. And so this ghost tour and all ghost tours are about folklore and history. And so I thought it would be great to just sit down with Janet Bessignol. Am I getting your name correct?
Fabulous.
Oh, it's so difficult. I worried about it. Who is the creator of this ghost tour and a ghost aficionado, let's say, to talk all about Antigonish's most famous ghosts, let's say, or most famous ghost stories. So, Janet, hello and welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, yes, ghost tours. Let's talk about ghost tours, because this is a phenomenon. It's not like you just came up with this idea out of nowhere. But what drove you to want to have a ghost tour here in Antigonish?
Well, I have always enjoyed going on ghost tours in various places. I wouldn't say that some people actually will seek them out. That will be, some people do a Frenchies trip around Nova Scotia.
Fair enough.
Some people do a ghost tour trip around Nova Scotia. And I wouldn't say that I've gone that far, but anytime I have a chance to go, I go, and I always enjoy it. It's part performance, it's part an insider's view of a local history, local folklore, local culture. Always interesting. I've never been on a ghost tour that I haven't enjoyed at some level. And so I thought Antigonish, actually, as I kind of threw the idea around, more and more stories started coming out of the woodwork, and someone would tell me a story and they'd say, well, you should talk to so-and-so. And I would talk to so-and-so, and then they'd have a pile of different stories. And it came to me that we're actually a very haunted place.
A very haunted place.
More than many, I would say.
Yeah, and I don't know if everyone living here necessarily knows that. I feel like a lot of locals are familiar with ghost stories, but you, because you're the sort of focus of these ghost stories, have been collecting a ton of them, essentially over the past 2 years. This has been running for 2 years?
Yeah, this is the second season.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's interesting for people to know that like these ghost tours, they aren't necessarily about ghosts. You don't have to be a person obsessed with ghosts or the supernatural. You can just be into history and folklore, and it is fascinating. Nonetheless, Antigonish seems to be famous for a few ghost stories. So I mean, I don't want to spoil the tour, right? Because people should want to go on it. But I do want to hear some of the more famous ghost stories. And what would you say is the most famous?
Well, I would say actually it's a tie between three, because there are three stories that have Antigonish on the ghost map, shall we say.
Okay.
The Blue Nun and the Red Priest, who live on campus.
Yeah.
They're famous, and generations of St. FX students, staff, and faculty they share experience that they've had experiences with, especially the Blue Nun. And as I say, I share the stories. I'm not somebody who, is in a ghost hunter or any of that.
Right. You're not there with your little detectors.
No.
This is not that kind of tour.
No, but I do share mostly stories that were shared with me by the person who claims to have experienced them.
Okay.
And people who have told me these stories, in some cases, I'm surprised, because I wouldn't have taken them as a ghost person.
Yeah.
And yet they're very adamant that they had these experiences. So it's funny, when I did have a conversation with your co-host Anuj, and he was saying, my first question would be, are there ghosts in Antigonish? And my answer would be, it depends who you are, who you're talking to.
Right.
And I, to your point about not being necessarily a ghost person, or someone who doesn't believe in ghosts, and not having to be one to go on this tour, it's as much performative as it is anything. And I always welcome people who are skeptics to just suspend their disbelief and get into the storytelling of the evening. Anyway, but back to your question,
Yeah.
Justin, about famous ghosts. So the Blue Nun, but also the fire spooks of Caledonia Mills.
Yeah.
Famous, has us on top haunted places in Canada lists.
It's like their television show. There was literally just this year, I think, January, on Bell. There was a whole documentary / TV show about it.
Yes, and I'm waiting for that to come available because I don't have Bell. Sorry, Bell. But it, and I've looked for it elsewhere, and it's really quite locked down, I think, right now. But hopefully we'll have a chance to see that and share it. But I do tell people about it. But there is a book. There's the internet. You can go down a rabbit hole on that story.
Yeah.
You can go down a rabbit hole on the third story I'll mention. But it's a large story, and often when I tell these stories, people on the tour tell me their experiences.
Right.
And some of the stories that I've heard on the tour end up in the tour because they're extremely, extremely compelling. And the people are sincerely sharing their experiences, and it's quite interesting.
Do you get people like randomly coming up to you? You're like, oh, you got to talk to Janet. She's the ghost person, and telling you stories like at the supermarket kind of thing?
Not quite. Not yet. I'm not that much of a celebrity yet. I'm trying. No.
Yeah.
But definitely, if a conversation comes up, almost everybody I know, unless they're an absolute, they'll say I'm a skeptic. Like there's a conversation. It's a conversation starter with anybody. So it's always interesting. But as I say, when I mention the tour, and especially in its development phase, when I would say, "Oh, I'm looking at launching a ghost tour," the people who would say, "Oh, well, you're going to talk about this," and it would be a story I'd never heard before,
Right?
And it was like, "Oh, tell me more." So, and again, people you would just never expect to have these kind of stories would have a story. So that's been very interesting. So I actually call it the named and unnamed ghosts in Antigonish because we have the Blue Nun and the Red Priest.
Yeah.
We have, the Caledonia Mills, not really a named ghost, but a named story.
Yeah.
And we have Hector.
Hector the Spectre.
The Spectre at the Bauer Theater. That is always a favorite story. It's such an interesting story. And it could be because I'm the stories that are shared with me are from theater people generally, but some very, very strong experiences. In fact, I think I've segued away from your question, which we'll come back to, but the Hector stories are particularly interesting because, as you know, you were involved in the Hector the Spectre Steals the Show podcast.
So Theater Antigonish put on Hector the Spectre during the pandemic. They put it on as a radio show, and then they turned it into a stage production. And it is about the ghost that lives at the Bauer Theater. But they also mentioned the Blue Nun and the Red Priest as well.
Yes.
So it's interesting because that play works locally because a lot of people know the story and or have had experiences.
Yes.
And so it hits a nerve more so than if it was just a random ghost story.
And how they collected many of the stories that were incorporated, or many of Hector's antics that went into that play, was they put out a call to the community as we were all isolated. It was just a great little thing that came to everybody. If you have an experience with Hector, share it with us. And they had quite a number of stories come in. And so I share, and they were integrated into the script.
Yeah.
And I always tell people about it because I think it's a worthwhile thing for people to take in as well. It's quite fun.
So before you give me just I don't want to spoil the whole stories, but if you give a quick overview of those top three maybe. But is there something, sort of stepping back, about this area that would explain why there are so many ghost stories? Like, I'm assuming there are more ghost stories here than there would be in other parts of Nova Scotia, maybe. Is it this, because here, of course, famously, like Cape Breton, a lot of Scottish influence? Is there some connection?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There would definitely, the predominance of the Gaels when they settled here, and the Gaels have many, many customs, pre-Christian Celtic traditions mixed in with Christian traditions, bringing that to Cape Breton and this area, but also the devout Christianity, the
Okay.
belief in the afterlife, and the traditions around the funereal traditions. But also, I would say the rural lifestyle, the hard lifestyle, so where people worked really hard, they were subject to the environment around them.
Yeah.
It was living in big families in isolation to some extent. Neighbors getting together, people sharing. Storytelling would have been a form of entertainment, but also a way to understand the world around them,
To make sense of the
to make sense
unpredictable.
of the unpredictability.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that I think led to. I mean, many of the stories I've heard come out of that type of tradition.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking because I have seen snippets of the Bell Show on the Caledonia Mills, and I think Lewis McKinnon is the narrator for it, and of
Mhm.
course Lewis is quite famous for being a Gaelic speaker, but also harboring a lot of this knowledge. So that sort of checks out. So there's this connection with the Gaels and Christianity. That's an interesting one.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And
it's like and
pre-Christianity
pre-Christianity.
traditions of like Samhain and
Yeah,
you know
well pronounced, by the way. My wife will be
I
very
had to practice
very
that.
proud.
I
Not
had to learn.
Samhain. Please don't say
I
Samhain.
know that was what I used to say, but I
Solid.
learned.
Yeah,
I
well,
learned.
but so it's sort of a perfect storm of traditions that have made Antigonish special in that sense.
In that sense. I mean, and just the other folklore from the French culture that was around the Mi'kmaq. Everybody would have fed into that, and I've tried to meet with storytellers and elders from all of the different cultures that make up Antigonish, and on an ongoing basis. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. This is always evolving, always evolving. As I learn more about the history, and people are very generous in sharing. You could. This is more information or specifics. Sorry,
Yeah.
about like the graveyards that I know you want to talk about. So I'm always learning, and people are always sharing that with me. I mean, for instance, even in terms of designing the program, the Antigonish or Theater Antigonish was invaluable. And they were invaluable because they had the experience of producing outdoor theater during the pandemic,
Oh,
and
I see. Yeah.
lots of great input there. And the Heritage Museum, invaluable, and the people associated with the Heritage Museum.
Yeah. Did Barry have stories for you?
Barry has endless
I,
stories.
I feel like he's a Lewis McKinnon type. Like he might just have an endless supply of stories.
Barry Mackenzie, the curator, wonderful storyteller himself, and a great historian. And also his predecessor has been very supportive. So, and then the Chamber of Commerce in terms of the business side of things. So, I mean, Antigonish is just such a great community and very, very much supportive of each other.
Yeah. So okay, let's do a very short version without spoiling it of those top 3 stories. So maybe we'll start with the Caledonia Mills one because I think that is the one that has gone the farthest in terms of like ending up in books and TV shows, perhaps.
And I tell guests on the tour that as many as there are stars in the heaven, there are versions and aspects to this story.
Right. But what are the main if you had to distill it into sort of a main series of events, what is this story?
Well, a very isolated farm in Caledonia Mills, southeast of Antigonish. An older couple who take in a 4-year-old distant relative when her father dies. And, they're living in isolation and other than their neighbors and et cetera. But as time goes on, strange things start happening on their farm. Everything from animals being moved around and tails and manes being braided and intricate braiding, ashes in the milk tins, things breaking, things going missing, et cetera, and escalating. And then fire starting in the house, nowhere near a heat source.
Right. And so all the people in the house are alive at the time, including the girl?
They're there.
Okay.
By the time this culminates, she's 16. The fires breaking out. There's a night in January of 1922 when they are fighting more than 30 fires inside the house.
So random fire starting in the house. That's the sort of the crux
breaking
of
out. The fire spooks of Caledonia. I mean, it has, again, many different titles and that kind of thing.
And they blamed it on the girl?
Ultimately they did, but they did try to investigate. And, the investigators, a local journalist who worked for the provincial paper was there, and he was involved for some time. He claimed many things happened when they stayed overnight. Being slapped by a phantom hand, hearing terrible noises. And again, I reiterate, other people might have a slight variation or variations of this story, but I have tried to distill it down. It's quite a complex story, actually. And an American researcher came to sort of also try to figure out what was going on. And strange things did happen while they were all there. But in the end, at first he said it was Mary Ellen, the 16-year-old who was behind it. But then he said, when he went away and wrote his report, he said that at first he said she may have been possessed by a spirit. Okay. But then he sends a report that says she was behind it. But
so she was in the middle of the night setting fires and slapping people, potentially.
Well, she wasn't there then,
Oh, she wasn't there.
She wasn't there during these investigations.
Oh.
But, he tried to say that she would have started the fires. Well, how the neighbors are over helping them fight fires one night, 30 fires. How would she have been able to start fires with all of those people around?
Okay.
How would she have been able to? And they did try to watch the farm to try to see if someone is up to some shenanigans.
Sure.
They never saw anybody, and no one ever said they saw her do it. But essentially, when ultimately it destroyed her life.
Sure. She's at the center of this.
She was at the center of it, and she had a troubled period in her life after that, and had a lot of troubles until she actually left the province, and was said to have a normal life after that, or as normal as it could be. But what is most interesting to me is how it carries on, and how many people have stories relating to going out there.
Right.
And
so people still do that today. They'll go out there, and the ghost hunter people are just ghost curious. Well,
people they're always very curious, but apparently I do not seek it out. I myself, but apparently it's hard to find. It's
the location
because it's grown over. This is 100 years ago that this happened, but the location is hard to find even for people who might be in the know. I'm sure there are people who do know exactly where to find it, but people would go out there and would report back strange happenings, and over generations. This isn't just one or two people. It's been over generations, and I constantly hear, oh, I know so-and-so who grew up there and they've got stories. So I could spend my life full time
recounting those and
meeting with people. And I try to do as much of that as I can.
So would you say this is common for ghost stories, is you'll have an incident usually in the past, quite far in the past, and then you have, obviously people are telling that story, but that's not really the main thing. The main issue is people keep going to the location, and even in modern times are still experiencing something having to do with that. So it's not just about the original story. It's about today in 2025? Janet, I don't even know what year this is. People are still experiencing that same ghost, essentially.
Yes.
Or the weird.
And making the similar claims. So what I always find interesting about the storytelling is, when people tell the same story about, or they offer descriptives that are the same as other people in the past have offered, or sort of like the Blue Nun, how people experience her, or Hector. Yeah. There's certain things that are consistent.
So if it's, that must lend credibility. If the story is the same and there's no reason for it to be the same because they didn't know about it, then that would be a reason. Oh, it must be real. Like it's sort of evidence kind of thing.
A little bit of evidence. A little bit of ghost busting evidence.
Sure. So that's the most famous story is the Caledonia Mills one, but the Blue Nun is got to be up there as well because of course it's at St. FX, and you've had tens or hundreds of thousands of students probably having the potential to encounter the Blue Nun. So what is that story all about?
Well, that story is about a nun who was teaching at the all-girls college, having an affair with a priest who was teaching at St. FX.
Okay. And what building was that?
That
Like
was in Mount
Gilmora?
St. Bernard,
Mount St. Bernard,
Gilmora,
yeah.
yeah. They had a love affair, and she was with child, and the shame of that, and at that time would have been more than she could bear. And
So just to be clear, back then, still not allowed for a nun and a priest to father. And like, so that would have been taboo. Yeah, it's
taboo
not like
then, taboo now.
Yeah.
But she's said to have taken her life,
Okay.
and the priest took his life.
Oh, right. So it's
But they never left the building.
okay. So that's common in ghost stories, right? There's some sort of tragic incident which binds them to this plane or whatever.
Yeah. In some cases,
Sorry,
for
I'm
sure.
talking
Well,
like-
like Hector McIsaac, the boxer at who is our Hector today,
Yeah.
died suddenly. A tragic moment, and and people who know about ghosts or read or more deeply involved would say that he wasn't ready to move on, or
Yeah.
the nun and priest weren't ready to move on. So
So they're in the buildings.
They're
This
in
is
the
the idea. And
buildings.
so as a student, you might bump into one of them.
yes, and one of the storytellers I met with, she spoke of the Blue Nun being. She was open to many times of hearing her in the hallways, or she'd open the door and there would be nobody there, and no way that anybody could have gotten away into a room. So she would hear that. But also, one evening, she says that she couldn't sleep, and the Blue Nun, she opened her eyes, and the Blue Nun was sitting in the corner of her room
Oh.
and acknowledged her, and seemed to be praying, and she was comforted by the Blue Nun, who is said to be someone who looks after the students.
Okay. So she's not setting, like the Caledonia Mills, she's not setting fires and causing poltergeist style
No.
nonsense.
Quite,
Yeah. A pleasant
Thank you.
figure.
Yeah, but quite. Yeah, looking after the students,
Oh.
and and then she fell asleep when and had the best sleep she had had for a long time.
Helpful.
So
I don't know if I would fall asleep if I saw a weird person sitting in my room.
No,
Fair enough.
But she knew it was the Blue Nun.
Okay.
So I questioned her with my mild skepticism and said, "Are you sure that wasn't a dream? That you?" And she said, "Well, when I woke up the next morning, the papers on my desk were sorted and neatened, and the chair was tucked back
An
in."
extremely helpful ghost. Helps you sleep, organizes your papers. I would not mind being haunted by such a figure.
Right?
Right?
So, and one of the custodial staff was locking up, and in the other side of the Mount St. Bernard College, the daycare, and going room to room, could hear somebody singing and saying nursery rhymes and giggling, and went room to room. "Hello, I'm here to lock up. Is anybody here?" And but nobody was there,
Right.
and he just backed out, locked the door, and went away.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you probably have come across lots of people on the tours who are like telling you their story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of St. FX students. And so that's number 2. Number 3 is Hector. So Hector you were saying he was a boxer. He died.
He died
in the building.
when in the Bower. Before it was the Bower, was the gym.
Yeah.
And had a boxing ring and a basketball court, and he died suddenly in the ring. And as we know, athletes, that does happen, sudden death.
But just recently.
Unfortunately.
With boxing. Yeah.
And but Hector has been at the Bower ever since, and according to people who have had experiences with Hector, and there are many. Always surprises me who will tell me a Hector story.
For sure. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the theater, as have you, and like pretty much everybody has some Hector story. Yeah.
Or, a feeling of Hector, if not an experience of Hector.
And he's
Yeah.
acknowledged a lot.
Yeah.
Every every theater seems to have a ghost of some kind. And
Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
so Janet, we've mentioned 3 stories so far, including Hector, but Hector's probably not as famous as the last story that you would like to mention. So tell us about it's the man who wasn't there. What's the name of it?
It's a poem
A
called
poem.
Antigonish. I met a man who wasn't there.
Right. And And this is famous because that is an actual poem that is spread around the world that people know. Like
Yes.
It's a famous poem.
It is. It's very, very famous and written by an American
Okay.
who is said to have had an experience in Antigonish. And of course, on the tour, I offer what I think could have been the inspiration, his inspiration.
Okay.
But interestingly, and I won't recite the poem, but I do encourage people to have a listen. It's again, go down a rabbit hole on the internet about this poem, and it's quite famous, quoted in Hansard. An MP was making fun of another MP who was never probably not showing up for question period. I met a man who wasn't there.
That's hilarious.
But also, it's been mentioned in Midsummer Mysteries and in Father Brown Murder or Mysteries. But also, there's some belief that David Bowie was inspired to write the song "The Man Who Sold the World" based on some of this. And it was written originally to go in as a song to go into a play written by the same author, William Hughes Mearns. And his play never took off, but the poem was published in 1922, and people who know it well.
Well, I'm going to then put this at the top of the list of the most famous things because it's more than just a ghost story. It's a piece of art that people know. And if David Bowie is involved,
I'm down for it.
That's right. So, okay, that's the number one most famous story.
Okay, we've just decided. We voted.
Okay, two people. It's democracy. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it for ghosts. It's good that you didn't get into too many details because there's a lot more to be said on the tour.
Yes.
But I do want to pivot before we wrap up to the graveyard part. Now, I found this fascinating when I was on the tour, which is where the gas station is on Main Street. There used to be the church.
So, well, the first church was where around where Scotiabank is.
Oh, okay.
So in the church had the land. 1805, they built a church. 1810 was called St. John's. Eventually was renamed St. Ninian. And the burial ground of that church, where people used to be buried in churchyards, was close to that area. And if you look at a map, it almost looks like it would be under Oak Manor, but they'll describe it as being more where the credit union is to the corner of Main and College. Of course, College Street wasn't there at that time.
Right.
So people were buried there, and Bishop Fraser at the time wanted to build a bigger church, so they bought land where the old Legion is, where the Circle K is now, and they decided to build a much larger church, which was the first big St. Ninian's, held 800 people, so it would have been an imposing structure there. And they wanted to have a graveyard with 185 sites and with room for 6 burials in each site. So they did that, and that went on until the last burial there would have been in 1881, but it would have slowed down. And then in 1881, the new graveyard up on the hill on the other side of the highway, because there seemed to be a movement away from church graveyards.
Yeah.
To cemeteries.
For everybody.
Yeah, for everybody. So so they had that church, those graves, and the graveyard extended, and there are maps available of this, but basically where the current new Pioneer Cemetery is, behind
which you can
the
see
Circle
now.
K.
It's been fixed up. It looks very nice.
It's lovely. It's been created into a space to honor our pioneers, Scottish-Irish pioneers. And under the pavement and under the Opportunity Shop and John Paul Center and Howe
Those are
Club,
all graves.
they're all graves. Now, it fell into disrepair. And I know at one point, most people wouldn't have known. If you didn't know, you would not have known that any of that area was just an open field where the Pioneer Cemetery is now. We also know that older graveyard that I mentioned earlier around College and Main, some people would have been moved, but we know that not all were moved. Now, some graves may have been dug up when the first buildings went up, but there was a body disinterred when the garage for the credit union was being built.
Okay.
And that would have been in the 70s. And this would have been, we know about it because, people are still around from the 70s. And in fact, my neighbor had a business on Main Street and he said it was quite a spectacle. Everybody was there, watching this. So So it's not likely that every grave would have been moved. Many might not have been marked.
I would imagine not. So that's what I found fascinating is if you believe that ghosts do crop up out of, like in the movie Poltergeist, out of a grave area that has been forgotten about, let's just say, then what's interesting to me is that there are probably hundreds of graves under the Scotiabank in the parking lot back there, and also under like the op shop or whatever. So like all of Main Street on both sides is potentially littered with graves from 150, 200 years ago. Is that what you're...
Well...
Maybe the truth? Is that true?
It suggests, I mean, not all of the graves were moved.
Right.
The church, quite possibly the buildings that were put there were, everything had fallen into disrepair, and they felt that, well, we can move on with honorable activities in those buildings and that kind of thing.
Well, what I'm hoping is that if this information gets out there, we can seed the public with the potential, and therefore we're going to start getting Oak Manor ghost stories and Credit Union ghost stories and Scotiabank ghost stories.
Absolutely.
So let's work on that, everybody.
And then if you have one, give me a call.
That's right. This is more fodder for your ghost story. We can expand it.
Exactly.
But,
well, Main Street, there are several stories of hauntings in Main Street.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. And as I say, I have more stories than I can share.
Absolutely.
And the walk changes because it depends on the group, as you know, as you well know, as in the kind of performing you do, that the crowd is so important to the. I hate to call it a performance.
It is a bit of a performance.
A bit, but it's storytelling.
Sure,
it's a storytelling,
but theatrically.
Hopefully.
Like you're a stage person, and so it comes across as a bit of theater and showmanship.
It's and let's suspend our disbelief and go with the flow kind of evening for
exactly.
sure.
So even skeptical nerds like me can still enjoy it. So,
but you asked initially, Justin, why? Like, what was the idea? Part of the idea was also that it's a new thing for Antigonish as a business proposition in terms of, after the restaurants close, it's something to do, go for a walk. But also, it's just a value add to come to Antigonish. And I also have act as a bit of someone who can offer, I don't want to say ambassador, that sounds so fancy, but people will ask for recommendations. And, I share about our theater, and I share about a lot of things about Antigonish that aren't ghost related, just good reasons to be here, because it's a great place to be.
For sure. Well, I think it's interesting, and it really does, because we're talking about the history of the town and folklore. So it's interesting in its own right. So it's something people can look up. There's probably books about it. I can't name any off the top of my head, or take the ghost tour itself. But realize, if you didn't already know, that you're living in a ghost-heavy town. It's famous for its ghosts. So it's worth thinking more about. And Janet, thank you for coming in to chat about this.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, and thank you everybody for listening. Stay safe out there. It's still dry, so take the necessary precautions. Have a go bag and an emergency kit ready to go in case you have to evacuate. I'll just mention that again. Last week's episode was about emergency preparedness, and even though there was a bit of rain, not like a couple nights ago, it's still dry out there. So stay safe, y'all.
It is, and we don't want more ghosts.
Maybe we do. Maybe stay less safe so Janet can tell more stories about you.
There are already enough.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Antigonish. If you like the podcast, don't hesitate to subscribe. Just go to letstalkantigonish.ca and click. Voila! You'll receive new episodes right in your email inbox.
This podcast is a labor of love. Please consider making a contribution, small or large. Maybe a monthly subscription. Depending on the level of public support, we would like to engage local producers and journalists to create more regular deep dive news stories about life here in Antigonish.
Right now, it's just Anuj and I doing this in our free time. You can read all about the podcast and ways to support us at letstalkantigonish.ca. And if you're a local business that wants to sponsor the podcast or even place an audio ad, we are certainly not opposed. A huge thank you to all of our subscribers, and especially our paid subscribers, which have helped us to buy the audio equipment that we needed to get this thing off the ground. And remember to get in touch with us if you have an idea for a future episode or a burning question about life in Antigonish that you want us to explore and get answers to. We welcome all feedback. Just email us at letstalkantigonish@gmail.com. Let's talk, Antigonish.